Well, hello and welcome. We are officially doing a week of the Mothership 3 Subversive palette from Pat McGrath Labs here on my channel. I asked you in my Subversive is back in stock. Get ready with me if you would be interested to have a whole week of looks with this palette, and a lot of you voted yes. And you know, when people get excited for me to post video with Pat McGrath Labs eyeshadow palettes, I'm always on board. So here we are. This is going to be the second video. I will add the original video as the first one in the playlist. As I mentioned in that original video, the Subversive palette is finally back in stock after being in and out of stock for quite a while. From what I can tell from the website, they still say that the quantities are limited. I don't fucking know what that means. Maybe it means that it's going to sell out within the next week, or that it will stay for another couple of months and then it will run out again. I have no idea. But what I'm here to do is just, you know, provide you with some inspiration in case you have the Subversive palette or you just recently bought it upon the restock. Now, usually when I do my week of a certain palette, I don't really include doing my face makeup in the video. I mainly try to focus on the eyeshadow look so that we go a little bit quicker through the video and it's not a very long one. And that's probably what I will do for the looks of the rest of the week. But because I spoke about some new products in my previous video, which I will also link up for you in the cards if you would like to check that out, I recently purchased a new bronzer, and the bronzer I'm referring to is the Diffused Bronzed Light from Hourglass. And because the look that I'm going to be creating today I think is going to lean a bit more on the cooler side, I really wanted to demo this bronzer for you properly on both of my cheeks, and also with a blush that I feel like would really go with the undertones of this blush, because unlike a lot of the other blushes in my collection, this one is truly more of a neutral to cool tone. So with that being said, I'm going to apply a little bit of this bronzer now and also pair it with a blush that I think is going to really fit well with it. Oh, I just really love the tone of this bronzer so much. I'm so happy with it. And the blush that I would really like to pair this with is one of the blushes that I felt like really didn't fit with any of the undertones of my current bronzers, or the bronzers that I had up till that point in my collection. And the shade that I'm referring to is Flirtatious from Pat McGrath, which, as you can see, has this really beautiful, like, nude pink cool toned undertone to it, and it was always just looking a little bit off with my other bronzers. So I cannot wait to pair this finally with a bronzer that I feel like is a bit more suited for the tones of this blush. So let's just go ahead and apply a ton of Flirtatious. Flirtatious has a very light tone, so you can definitely build this blush up or keep it a bit more subtle. It's the lightest shade in the Pat McGrath blush range, so it's definitely one of the more forgiving shades in terms of pigmentation. And I feel like finally this looks really good, because the tones of these two products just merge with each other so much better. Now, super quickly before we move into the eyeshadow, I'm going to apply a little bit of highlighter, and I'm going to take the Lunar Nude highlighter from Pat McGrath Labs, which is also a somewhat more cool toned product. I think these three are just going to be perfection together. So I zoomed you in a little bit. Let's get started on the eye look, and the idea for today's look as well is also to keep it on the more subtle side, possibly. It will be a smokier look though, because the shade that I want to be using all over my lid today is this one. This is a more pink toned brown shadow that definitely leans on that very like satin formula of textures that Pat McGrath offers, which can be very versatile because you can use it on your lid to have a bit of a sheen, but you can also use it more of a like classic matte eyeshadow and just blend it out through your crease. And because it has this formula, I think it's going to work out really well as like a one and done eyeshadow. So I'm just going to start applying this shade as the first one for this look, and then we're going to be possibly adding more shades, and there is one that I would like to layer over top of that just to create a little bit of a more interesting effect. I'm going to take my jumbo blender from Sonia G, and I'm going to apply this brown shade just all over my lid, starting here towards the lash line, and then slowly bringing it upwards towards the crease and blending it out without applying too much additional product, because the shade is relatively deep, at least for someone of my skin tone. This is a sort of deeper shade. It is better if I don't over apply product when I bring it up towards my crease, because it will get very dramatic very fast otherwise. And as you can see, because of the texture of this shade, it just blends out effortlessly. I really love this formula from Pat McGrath because I just find it to be so incredibly versatile. Now that I have applied the shade and pretty much blended it out, I'm going to apply the tiniest bit more on the lid just so I even it out a bit, because it doesn't look still very even on my lids. So I'm just going to apply a tiny bit more, and again give it a nice blend. The next shade that I'm going to take is one of the topper shades, but instead of applying it to full opacity, I kind of want to melt it together with that brown shade just to create the most subtle duochrome effect ever. And the shade that I'm referring to is this one here. This is the purpley blue duochrome, and I'm going to take it again on my Sonergy Jumbo Blender brush. I'm not going to apply any sort of glitter glue, and I'm going to start just sweeping it here on the lid and kind of like working it together with that brown shade, just so it creates this really pretty sort of like blue sheen, but without that blue sheen really overtaking the look or looking too sparkly. If you really want it to go like bam sparkle, you could apply glitter glue and then use your finger and apply the duochrome shade over top of that, and it would look so much more like sparkly and intense on the eyes. But I'm going for a more subtle effect today, which is why I'm going to kind of leave it at that, which is very unlike me. I am now going to take a little bit of my Pat McGrath Intensifies and apply this here into my inner corner though, because the next shade that I want to apply is sort of a difficult shade for me, at least with this palette, and I absolutely need to have laid a little bit of a glitter glue underneath when I use it. And the shade that I'm referring to is this one here. It's sort of like Astral White from the Subliminal palette, but with a far drier texture and with a pink duochrome. Theoretically a really beautiful shade. In practice I have complained many times about it because there's something off with the texture of this shade in my palette. Maybe newer iterations of the Subversive palette feel a lot nicer, but I don't like the texture of this shade much. I mean, it applies okay, it's really pretty, like you can see that really beautiful effect that it creates here on the inner corners, but it's not quite like Astral White. I would have much rather preferred to have a texture like Astral White here. If you wanted to keep it a little bit simpler, you could leave the lid at that and just proceed to your lower lash line. However, I am, for a change, feeling a little bit like a winged liner. However, instead of using the black, I'm going to use the dark brown so that the wing liner is a little bit more subtle, because it will sort of merge with what's going on the lid, but it will still give a little bit of that elongated effect. Or at least that's the hope. Doing like a little smoky wing with an eyeshadow, it's always a little bit more forgiving than actually doing it with a liquid liner or something. Now for this next step, I'm going to go back into Intensifies now and apply a little bit of that on my lower lash line. And just to make the look more coherent, I'm going to take this shade now again, but this time I will apply it on my lower lash line over that glitter glue, so it will be a little bit more intense, but still more subtle because it's just a pop on the lower lash line. I think you can immediately tell how much more poppy this is over that base. Well, depending on your definition of subtle, you may consider this look to be more on the subtle side or on the really dramatic and smoky eye side. Subversive is absolutely a palette that has a very signature presence to it, and I would say the hallmark characteristic of this palette is that no matter what you do, you're always going to end up with some version of a smoky eye, except for if you use that very light champagne shade that I used on my lid last time, and you go for one of the lighter topper shades. Everything else is going to give you a very smoky look. So inevitably we are going to end up with a little bit more, dramatic looks, but there are many ways in which you can tone down the look that I did today. You could, for instance, completely skip the wing, and then instead of doing that bright blue lower lash line, which I did, just go for that Lazarus shade again, the blue, sorry, not the blue, the brown. Just smoke it out on your lower lash line, and then you have a brown smoky eye with like that very subtle blue duochrome to it. By my definition, that would be a very wearable look with a Subversive palette. Now, you could also tone down the lips, which would make a huge difference for how this look comes across. Now it's looking very dramatic because also the lipstick and the lip products that I chose for this look are also on the more dramatic side. So I chose, for instance, to pair the look with Latte from Anastasia Beverly Hills, which is a pretty deep brown nude. And on top of that, I even applied a little bit of lavendering from Pat McGrath Labs because I just love how lavendering complements the eye look. But all of that makes the look so much more dramatic. If you just applied like a more nude pink or something, this would also tone down the look significantly. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this second look that we did for the Wake Up Subversive palette. Don't forget to let me know what you thought about it, and we shall see each other again very, very soon. Bye!